Hi, this is Lori Kerr in the Professional Learning Department. This video is about using the extension Grackle Slides to make our slide presentations accessible. In our previous videos, we identified how to access and install the Grackle extensions and how to use the Grackle Docs extension on Google Docs. This video is about using the Grackle Slides extension to make slide decks accessible. So just like in the Docs video, we will access the extension by going to the extensions menu in Google Slides and selecting Grackle Slides and launch it. As you can see, this slide deck was made over 10 years ago and certainly was not designed with accessibility. Once Grackle Slides launches, it searches and looks for 5 main areas of accessibility considerations. The first is the presentation. So it's going to look to see if the presentation has a title, and it passes that, and if the language has been specified, and in this case it has. So it passes presentation. Then it's going to look at the slides itself. Each slide should have a unique title. And so in this case, we have identified some slides that don't have titles at all, and there shouldn't be any blank slides in a slide deck. It will look for tables to determine if tables have been tagged, if merged cells have been used, and if there are empty cells. And in this case, this particular slide deck doesn't have any tables, so it passed that check. Several issues here with elements. When we're looking at elements, it's going to check images for alternative text. It's going to check to see if there are empty text boxes and if there are lists that don't fall in the right sequential order. So we have some issues with elements. And then finally, it's going to look at other things within the contents. So it will look at font size, it's going to look at color contrast, it will look at changes in the text styles in line that it might identify it as not being a real clear meaning, and then if there are empty lines within the paragraphs. So we're going to go in and fix most of those. We're also then going to look at slide structure, which is this second tab over here. So we're going to start with the slides themselves. So a hallmark rule is that slides should all have titles. So when I click on this where the red X is, it identifies that I have 3 slides that have problems with the titles, 2 of which don't have titles at all. 1 has multiple titles. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this first slide to see which one it is. So it identifies this slide as not having a title. And even though it looks like there's a title there, this has not been identified as a title placeholder. And I can't do that from this part of the interface. I actually have to go into the master slide and include a title placeholder in order for this slide to have a unique title. This is how I do that. I know in our Google Slides demonstration, we talked a little bit about this, so I'm going to just show you how you do it here. I go to the slide menu, so I'm up here, and I want to edit the theme. This is the only place that I can add title placeholders, is when I go into the master slides. So I'm going to edit theme, and it shows me the slide that I'm on. This particular slide does not have a title anywhere on it. So the way I do that is I'm going to insert one. I'm going to insert a placeholder. So I'm going to insert. Notice here at the bottom of my insert menu, I have a placeholder submenu. And this is where I'm going to put in my title placeholder. So I get to decide where I want it. I actually don't want it on the page, but I know I have to have a title. So I'm going to just put that title up there. When I go back to my slide, that box is going to appear. It will allow me to include my title, and then it will register as a title on the page without actually putting it on the page. So I'm going to reapply that, and I'm going to close. And so now it kind of shifted some things around because I added something to it after the fact. I'm just going to move this back to the top where it was. And up here, I now have my title placeholder. I'm just going to call it HyperDocs example, because that's what's on the slide itself. So I have a title there now. It doesn't appear on my page, but it should then, when I recheck it, mark it as having a title. I need to do the same thing on slide 8. One more slide. This slide is different because it's got multiple titles. So again, this deck was made 9 years ago. What likely happened is I had a title placeholder and just copied that to another part of the deck. And so there are now 2 title placeholders on here, and you only want 1 title on the slide. So I still need to go into slide. I'm going to edit the theme. And here is where my title is, right? And here's where my subtitle is. I'm going to just say reapply to all and then go fix the slide. So reapply. Now it moved everything around, right? So I'm going to move this back up here, but I should only have 1 title on my slide now, which is this one that's questions, and we'll see if that fixes it. Let's just recheck and see if that worked. It's going to reanalyze. We didn't fix everything yet. We're working on those slide titles. And it will do another check. I feel like the second, yes, this still has multiple titles. That's one I'm going to have to come back to because I'm not sure what happened unless it's like this. I'll have to come back to that to fix it. Like we said earlier, tables passed. I'm going to move on, just for the interest of time, I'm going to move on to elements. And just as a reminder, it's so much easier to build fresh from scratch an accessible deck than trying to retrofit. Like I said, I made this deck 10 years ago. I have no idea how I designed it, and so now trying to find that title placeholder is going to be kind of hard on this slide. What I might find is it's just easier to rebuild this slide than trying to make it fit the accessibility requirements. I'm going to move on to elements. So I have several images in here that need alternative text. This is going to identify all of the images that need some text. We know that this slide, slide number 7, has an image that does not have alternative text. It's this QR code. So I'm going to tag it. And what I'm going to do is mark this one as an artifact, because someone who is using a screen reader is not going to be able to access a QR code anyway, but I have the link on the page, so the end user will still be able to access the content, but they can access it in a different way. It's an equivalent way, not using the QR code, using a hyperlink instead. So I'm going to go ahead and update that, and now that will not be a problem because we have tagged it. So I'm going to close that. And again, that's not going to go off of being, it's not going to turn to a green check mark until I recheck it. All right, let's look at text boxes. It looks like we have an empty text box somewhere. So let's go and find that. So clicking on text box, it's going to locate it. It's actually on this slide, and all I'm going to do is delete it, and now we don't have an empty text box. And there was only one of them. Let's see which lists. All right, let's find the list that is broken in this. Here it is on this slide. So it's suggesting that we have some issues probably with spacing. If I want to keep that spacing, all I need to do is highlight it. I'm going to go to this More menu, and in spacing, I can change spacing by clicking on this icon and just making that a little bit I can add a space before or after the list item. So I might actually do that by adding a space after each list item, and that still breaks it up a little bit more neatly. And I'm just going to make sure there's nothing else in here. Oops. Nothing else in here that would be a problem in terms of spacing. So I'm just going to highlight. I think we got it. So now the list is not broken apart. I got rid of those extra spaces in between each list item. So we fixed that. We're ready to move on to these contents. Notice that this is brown. That just indicates that these are things that are flagged, but it would pass. Although I know that there are some real issues with color contrast and the print on this particular deck. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. We have a text box. It says some shape texts are too small. We have font size of 8, font size of 8, font size of 8. So let's go to those text boxes. One is here. It's providing just some reference information, but 8 is too small. So I'm going to go in and make it 12, and that should fix it. I'm going to go to the next one. We took care of that. High color contrast, lots of color contrast issues. So this actually tells me exactly what the hex codes are, and all of these that are identified are too low. So it's going to identify where that's at, which is going to give me an opportunity to change it. And so I know that a black on this background color will be fine. So I'm going to change the color from this blue to black, and that should take care of that one. Let's find the next one. So next one, we're going to go on to this next one. It says inline style changes may lack clear meaning. So I'm going to have it find that for me. We're going to find that text box where there's an inline style change. So it goes from the hyperdoc link to just regular text. And for this, I'm going to leave it as is. This isn't a big problem for screen readers. The way this is going to read it, assuming it reads it correctly, is it will say link or say hashtag link, hyperdocs, end of link, and then it will read the possibilities are limitless. And so this is actually a link, and that's why the text styles have changed in the middle. One thing I could do is just make this the same color as, and the other problem is it went from all caps to regular case. So I could change the color to match the blue of the hyperdocs. That's a different blue, and that should help with the in-text change or inline change as well. I'm going to go ahead and use that. And then we've got some empty lines all over the place. So we want to get rid of those so it doesn't read empty lines. So I have this empty line here in this text box. If I can get back into the text box. That one, and I want to get rid of that empty line. Let me have it find it again. There we go. I'm in it. I'm in my text box, and it really doesn't want to let me in there. There we go. So I'm just going to get rid of that extra line, and so then I would find the next one and get rid of those extra spaces so that it's not reading blank lines to our end user who is relying on a screen reader. As you can see, those are ones that we want to fix. So I'm going to go on to the next tab here to look at the slide structure. This is where we talked about how the slide is arranged, or the elements on the slide are arranged. And remember, we want that bottom to top mindset whenever we're doing that in the slides interface, but when we use the slide structure from Grackle Slides, we can put that in the order that it logically makes sense to us. So for instance, we want HyperDocs for blended learning to be the first thing that's read on this page. And the paragraph, then the next thing that's going to be read is, right now, is that text box. But I probably want them to get access to my slide deck first. So I'm going to move that. So whenever I tab through it, it will go to the title, and then it will go to my hyperlink, and then it will go to my text box. I think this is the text for that image. So there is alternative text, but it is just decorative. So I'm going to tag this as decorative. So there's two places I can do it. I could do it on that other tab, or I can do it right here. And I'm going to mark it as an artifact because while it has alternative text, it's not critical for understanding what's going on this slide. So I'm going to update that. This is a text box that provides context for the image. So that would be the last thing I would want it to read. And then I have my ESU3 blended as the next piece. Notice here we've got this paragraph, and then it's got the blank line, but we got rid of that blank line, so we should be in good shape at this point. And I'm going to have it do a quick recheck to update what it's identifying as problems. Notice most of those failures went away because we fixed things already when we did the access. So slide 1 here is looking pretty good in terms of the order. Now remember, I want to tab test that. So if I come back in here and I start tabbing through, not there, I need to be, sorry. If I'm back on the slide and I try and tab through, it should go to the title first, then it should go to my hyperlink, then it's this information. Remember, we're ignoring the image. So it will go there, but it will ignore it because we have tagged it as an artifact. Then it's going to go to my hashtag, and then finally we would include the, all right. So that is how you use Grackle Slides to make your slide decks accessible. And like I said, I didn't go through every single piece of this to make it 100% accessible, but this is a document I'm probably never going to use again, so I wouldn't technically have to make it accessible. It's just an archived document. But as you're using Grackle Slides, those are the things that you want to be thinking about as you're working to make them available and accessible to all stakeholders. Thanks.